All right, so for my CLR update this week, I found a couple of good sources that help to work together with other sources that I have to verify some ideas that I had, and also raise other questions for me to look into. So the first one is my seventh source. It discusses the use of guided inquiry learning after high school in multiple different college programs, including nursing programs and pharmacology and a few biology and a few different things along those lines, and how it can help to develop lifelong skills such as group teamwork, cooperative learning, critical thinking, problem solving, all of these types of skills that students need as they turn into adults in the real world. This study helped to verify that what other sources were saying about how process-oriented guided inquiry learning, POGIL, helps to improve student achievement as well as student engagement in the learning process. They just enjoy it a lot more. So that was brought up a few times, and as one of the main results. And it also relates to some other sources that discussed sort of the challenges of implementing this technique well, and what that looks like and what that takes from the teaching perspective, as well as sort of prepping the students for that kind of process, and tying it in with more traditional methods to make it work well and make sense and make that transition work out okay. Another source that I found, my fourth source, was a quantitative causal comparative study. So this head-to-head comparison between chemistry teachers at two different schools. One school's teachers implemented POGIL, and that significantly increased the student achievement and engagement over the control group of the other chemistry teachers that did not, that just kind of kept doing their traditional teaching methods in the other school. Again, this verifies multiple other sources where that say that POGIL improves test scores and student engagement, just like the one before. And one thing that I missed on my previous source is that one way that it relates to other sources that I have is that it helps to kind of fill the gaps in the continuum of how this can be implemented. So I've seen from 4th grade, 7th grade, high school, and now into college. So that's just one thing from my 7th source that I forgot to include there. So this one also talked about, with our head-to-head comparison, some of the challenges of implementing POGIL well, and what the teacher professional development looks like and things like that. A couple sources that I revisited from the past, a couple of my first ones that I have in the matrix, I didn't really have any discussion or any notes on the limitations of the research, so I went back and looked for some of those things. So in one of them, I saw that there wasn't really any discussion on the limitations, even though this study was done on just 10 teachers from 2 towns that were near each other in southwest Georgia, and they were similar schools, and so there's obviously a small sample size limitation there, but the offset of that is that it was a 3-year study, and so the qualitative data is very rich and detailed and pretty useful, I think, because they were really able to follow what this process looks like for these teachers, and to keep tabs on them and help them to continue to implement the strategy, even though it can be challenging sometimes and it's easy to just sort of let it slip away. So again, it verified how, like, a lot of the discussion was centered around how it's challenging to implement it well and to keep it going, but how they still verified in the results section how it does improve student achievement and engagement, just like I've been seeing in almost all of my other sources. So the other source that I revisited again, I noticed that the researchers had pretty detailed information about the questionnaire that they used to gather the data from students and teachers, and they discussed how they worded the questions and how they progressed the questions, that they knew that they would get some useful information, and not just surface level sort of details. They were able to dig in a little bit and still keep a number scale, basically, so they could do quantitative analysis of that data. To me, the sample set seemed a little small for that kind of analysis, but they were still able to draw some pretty clear conclusions that I think would be pretty easy to generalize. It was a relatively simple, relatively straightforward study. So yeah, they did have a short discussion on the limitations. They were unsure about one of the phenomena that they observed, but then they used other existing literature to sort of fill that gap. And then they suggested that other research be done on that topic to help to fill in that gap. So I still think it's a reliable and useful source, just like the other one that I looked at. Even though there wasn't much discussion on limitations, I think that because of that 3-year long-term following this group of teachers, that it's still probably useful. Maybe not as generalizable because it's a very specific context, but I think there's still good information there to pull from. So that's my update for this week. Thanks.